Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Night Podcast. It's going to be a very interesting discussion tonight. Stay tuned. Mercy Brown, she was considered a vampire back in the day. So let's talk about that. It's something I mentioned on a live stream a while back, and I thought I'd go into more detail about what happened. So let's check this out. Okay, so this is about Mercy Brown. As you can see, the headstone there. In the 19th century New England, an outbreak of consumption, which is later would be known as tuberculosis, triggered a widespread panic. Consumption, like I said, is now known as tuberculosis. It was a leading cause of death in the 1800s, and by all counts, it was a gruesome way to die. The most common symptoms included extremely high fever, blood laced cough, sunken eyes, and severe physical deterioration that made sufferers look like they were just lifeless, like they're just barely making it. This particular outbreak spread so rampantly and claimed so many lives that rumors of a sinister force soon surfaced. Residents blamed the presence of vampires, mostly in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Vermont, who spread the sickness from victim to victim. So they're thinking that this was uh, not so much like the fangs, teeth, and that type of vampire exactly, but they were feeling like that this is possibly a dead body coming back to life to feed off the dead to continue living, and we'll get into that. In order to stop the problem, corpses of the ones who had died from consumption were exhumed. Their internal organs were burned to prevent the vampire from feeding on the diseased body. So and, and transferring the sickness to the rest of the population. So they were thinking, if we dig these people up who died of this consumption and we burn them, and in some cases they did turn them upside down, by the way, so they would be facing the earth and couldn't maybe rise out of the grave. They thought if they would do this, it would stop this whole vampire style situation. Some of the rituals were more extreme than others. In fact, that one 19-year-old girl became the scapegoat. Her name was Mercy Brown. Mercy Brown and her family lived in exterior Rhode Island. The area was populated with farmers, and they had struggled to live on their land and stuff. So the consumption came in and made it worse. Uh, like many uh, afflictions, it was not entirely understood, but by residents, and so it was feared. It was like, what is this? What's going on? We can't understand this. The beginning of 1882, the Brown family began to die from consumption in a rapid succession. First was Mary, Mercy's mother. Following year was Mercy's sister, Mary Olivia, and she died at the age of 20. It said in her obituary, described her as suffering as has been very has been so great that it was they thought was carried into the afterlife. Next was Mercy's brother Edwin, known as Big Husky Man. He began to wither away, but quickly left New England for Colorado in hopes for a better climate that would cure him, but that would not help. By the time Edwin returned a decade later, Mercy herself was in the threshold of death. She had been suffering from a more silent form of consumption for years, and is known as galloping consumption. Named so of a fast transition from invisible to fatal. So this went from a very long term sickness. Some were dying pretty quickly, by the way. An attending doctor informed Mercy's father, George, that the medical care was useless. And in January 1892, Mercy died. Her simple obituary was Miss Lena Brown, who had been suffering from consumption, died Sunday morning. That was it. That was the obituary. Because so many Browns had succumbed, uh, and the and to this what is now known as tuberculosis. Exterior residents suggested that George Brown that his family might be cursed. Furthermore, they surmised that the Brown women was not actually dead, so they're thinking that they're still alive, and still roaming and trying to feed off of people, but rather undead and feasting on living tissues and the blood of Edwin. So they're thinking they're feeding off of Edwin, and just crazy stuff that they were thinking. But anyway, it goes on. They believe that the key to Edwin's recovery would be to figure out which Brown woman was the culprit and destroy her body. This is just crazy and wild. The neighbors asked George Brown's permission to exhume the bodies of his wife and two daughters to check for fresh blood in their hearts. He agreed, but I have read several times in several places that he was very reluctant. But it was just he was getting pressure, real hard pressure from everybody. And the exhumations took place on the morning of March 17th, 1892. After 10 years in the ground, Mary Brown, the mother, and Mary Brown, the daughter, were little more than bones. So they realized, okay, there's nothing but bones. Okay, they can't be them. But Mercy had only been dead a few months in the wintertime when her body was uncovered. There was almost no decomposition. I mean, nothing. There was nothing decomposed at all, hardly at all. The neighbors took this to mean that Mercy was the offender. Now they were thinking they didn't realize that the frozen ground was somewhat keeping her preserved, and she was only dead a few months, not 10 years like the other two. One of the doctors on the side noted that Mercy was well preserved. Her heart and liver were removed. Upon cutting open her heart, the doctors found decayed blood. The examination of her lungs indicated the dormant presence of consumption germs. Nevertheless, the neighbors were convinced, not doctors so much, but the neighbors were convinced that they had exhumed the vampire. They burned Mercy's heart and liver on a rock. This is where it gets very disgusting and very crazy. So the people, not the doctors, keep this in mind. I didn't read a lot of places where doctors were really convinced that she was a vampire. They were more convinced of the fact that she was just decomposing, but it was cold weather and it's just taking some time. And of course, she wasn't in the ground 10 years like her mom and sister. So anyway, so they said they burned Mercy's heart and liver on a rock, then fed the ashes to Edwin Brown. So basically, what they did, and other things I've read, they took the ashes, put them in water, and he drank that. Very disgusting, very stupid. But they were thinking, in an attempt to reverse the symptoms of his supposed vampire attack, the ritual failed. Edwin died within 2 months. The remainder of the Mercy's violated body was burned, so they went ahead and burned her up anyway. Um, the death of Mercy Brown has achieved a cult following of sorts, comprised of both sympathizers and vampire enthusiasts. There are still people who actually think that she may have been a vampire. Uh, uh, I mean, you can obviously tell in the story she was not, but there are people who will, I'm sure, will believe that to the day they die too. She has been the inspiration of numerous writings, including H.P. Lovecraft's Shunned House, and supposedly the character of Lucy in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Depending on your leanings, a visit to Mercy's grave will either fill you with sorrow or cold whispers of centuries past. Um, I- Being in the paranormal field like I have been for a long time, I've never investigated this place. I've never been there, but I can tell you this: there's a lot of people when they do die, and they come back, and let's say they died of a quick death. That something happened very quick, very rapidly. Um, sometimes plane crash or something like that, uh, and is untimely. You will get occasionally you'll be able to They don't think they're dead. In other words, they still think they're alive. Now, in Mercy's case, I wouldn't think that would be the case. I would say she knew she was dead. Now she's dead, so you think that maybe, I don't know. I'll throw this out there to you. Do you think maybe um, she's upset because they burned her heart and liver? I mean, she could be upset from that. I mean, I don't know. But again, like I say, I've never investigated there, so I really don't have a clue. I can't personally say. There have been places I have investigated here where I live, where people who've murdered and who have been murdered, and I get some interesting things that come through. But these people were very crazy to think that, burning her heart and liver and feeding it to her brother would cure him. I don't know how in the world people didn't stop that. I mean, I could understand the father getting pressure, and maybe he just thought, let's put this to rest and be done with it. And of course, after 10 years, his wife and daughter, his oldest daughter, um, they were really decomposed. 'Cause, I mean, it had been 10 years, but Mercy had only been dead a few months. And in the cold weather, you're talking up north where it's really cold. She was going to be preserved for a bit. It's going to take her some time to decompose. And unfortunately, these people were just adamant about pulling her out of the ground, burning her up. And I have heard stories too that when they did dig her up, she was buried upside down. And the story there is they didn't know how that happened. In this story, I did not read that. The story I read on that Wednesday night live stream, there was some talk about her body being upside down. And I've read it somewhere else where she was buried upside down, or when they uncovered her, she was upside down, but that's not originally how she was buried. So I don't know about that story 100%, but either way, when they dug her up, they found that, she was still preserved, and they decided to burn her. You know, to me, that's very barbaric, very dumb, and should have been stopped the very minute somebody suggested it. But you get enough people scared and a panic, they'll do almost anything crazy. Um, and this is one of those instances where they did something very crazy. Hope you all enjoyed the story. Much love. Until next time, God bless. See you soon.